Giles Gidney for those of you that don't know me, and I am the very proud Mayor of Willoughby City Council, and I have been for the last 6 years. Not quite sure where that time has gone. It means that I'm 6 years older though, so that's a bit scary. But we've also joined tonight by a number of our councillors, and very pleased to welcome Deputy Mayor Craig Campbell. Do you want to put your hand up when I say that? Welcome, Craig. We've also got there Hugh Erickson. Welcome, Councillor Erickson. And Councillor Judith Rutherford, and Councillor Christine Chuan, and Councillor Wendy Norton, Councillor Tony Mustaka. Put your hand up, Tony. Give him a wave. Councillor Brendan Zhu. Thanks for coming along and supporting this. And it is... Oh, and Councillor Fernandez over this side. Welcome, hiding there under that beard, I see. So welcome, and we're also pleased that we've got senior members of staff here. We've got our CEO, Debra Just. We're going to hear from Debra shortly. Our Community Services Director, is that your official title or is there something else in there?
Community Culture and Leisure.
Oh, Community Culture and Leisure. Okay, Mel Smith, welcome. Newly appointed Chris Binns, who's doing planning and infrastructure. Chris is... sort of been with us for quite a while now, but newly appointed to the director's role, and he's kind of got the big gig. And sitting next to him with a big smile on his face is Greg McDonald, because he's handed over to Chris, and we are going to be hearing from Greg certainly very shortly. And Greg's new role is, what's your official title, Greg?
Customer and corporate, and anything else that sort of fits into the...
Yeah, customer and corporate. So that's called out of the frying pan into the fire, I think. Yes. Okay, so we're very pleased that you've all come along this evening. Thank you very much. We've got a very interesting topic tonight, which is how prepared are you? Very timely given the events of recent months. Certainly while we haven't been hugely touched by bushfires, we did have some mischief makers, but we managed to put out the fires before they were a problem, thank goodness. But of course the storms had a huge impact on our area, and we're going to hear about that further. So as we are talking about our countryside and natural events and nature and all those things, it's only appropriate that I do acknowledge the inhabitants of the land on which we stand, the Aboriginal people and their spirits and ancestors. And I do want to acknowledge the vital contribution that the Aboriginal people have made and continue to make this nation that we share, Australia. And the session, you'll see gentleman down the back there with the headphones on, we are going to be recording these sessions, and we will be posting the session on the web too. So if you want to go back, if you might have missed information, you can go back and have a look at that, show your friends and family. And we will be taking questions, and this is going to be a bit of an interactive session. You can see that we've got post-it notes and pens and things on the back, so the CEO is going to take us through that. So we will be interacting with each other. So I do remind you, and I'm sure I don't have to remind actually, to be courteous and respectful. I'm sure we will all do that. We are going to stimulate your thinking as to how we prepare as individuals and a community for emergencies. And of course, some of us will have had first-hand experiences over recent months, so you'll have an opportunity to talk about that as well. And to begin tonight, we've got our CEO, Debra Just, and she's going to walk us through a brief presentation of events that have unfolded over recent months. And then she'll be leading the facilitated activity that will get us thinking ahead. And then we're thrilled that we've got Greg McDonald, who's going to talk to us about Council's role and response. He's just recently handed over, as I mentioned, that portfolio to Chris about infrastructure and planning, so he's got a lot of experience there. And we're absolutely thrilled that we've got our very good friends from the SES joining us this evening, led by Jason Lee, do terrific work. Can we just give the SES a little bit of round of applause, because we love all the work they do. So with that, I will hand over to Debra. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Gale. Now, just before we pass off the first slide, that your top right-hand side is the Chatswood Oval, looking like a swimming pool after those really heavy rains that we had recently. The purpose for this evening is multifold, so we're very keen to give you an outline of the emergencies this summer, a fairly quick thumbnail, a quick short exercise, get your blood stimulated, but also to start you thinking around your own preparedness, and then coming back to a little bit more information around the agency's roles and the responses, and particularly looking at the storms and how the storms were managed in Willoughby. And we have a whole series of hot tips for you to take home as well. So the Mayor has been through the agenda for this evening, so we'll hold our questions to the end. And to begin, I'd just like to visit the ABC website for just take a small segment of a presentation that they've done on their website about the bushfires this summer. Now, the presentation is in an unusual kind of format, so it'll seem a little bit jerky on the slide, on the screen, but I'll just ask you to bear with. Thank you, Jason. So what you can see here is north at Newcastle, and you can see that yellow is burnt areas showing up in infrared imagery. Scrolling through to the Sydney area. On this summer down south to Balmoral. And a very clear impact as we head further south upon our politicians flying each day into Canberra in terms of the very blackened landscape that greets them. So 16 million hectares nationwide burnt. Over 1 billion animals, and we're talking macrofauna only, that we think we've lost. 3,500 homes as we continue to go south in the state. And 33 lives. Thank you. Now, we do have the link to that presentation. It is really worthwhile going through. It takes you then into the precursors in terms of drought and the extreme heat. There are images from every fire across Australia during this summer that show up that infrared kind of imagery. Now, for those of you who attended our resilience seminar a few months back, we showed this slide, which showed the biggest shocks and impacts that would affect Sydney. And here we go, we're living them this summer. Extreme weather was the largest. We've seen the water crisis just broken only recently with the rains, and the pandemic, of course, with COVID-19. So a very challenging summer in New South Wales, as it has been nationally. So 5.5 million hectares burnt, record-breaking temperatures on top of record-breaking droughts, and hazardous air quality. I can recall saying to my husband as we were flying to Adelaide for Christmas with the family, yay, fresh air after 2 months, the Sydney smoke, only to fly into the Kangaroo Island and the Adelaide Hills bushfires. The other thing, of course, that we're impacted by at the moment is COVID-19, as it's now become known, and its impact there on travel, overseas students, and the economic impacts which still await us in terms of their full force. Willoughby hasn't had fires, it hasn't had bushfires, it hasn't had massive flooding, it certainly got torrential rain, but we have had 3 storms and localised flooding this year. As a result, we had over nearly 2,400 homes without power, 516 calls, so an increase of 110% in terms of call, and a whopping 575% requests for vegetation removal and trees and so on. So forgive us if we don't remove the tree the day you want it removed. So one of the things that has been found by research, regardless of what the impact or the incident is that the communities that recovered best, so for example from the Kinglake fires a number of years ago in Victoria, and also the Christchurch earthquakes, they found that the communities that bounced back fastest, that had the greatest resilience, including to psychological trauma in terms of their recovery after significant events, were those that were actually last touched by the first responders. So those communities that were left for up to 2 weeks without outside agencies in that time had drawn in on their own personal resources, had united as a community and had organised themselves. And that very act of coming together and exercising your own power and your own prerogative and your own decision making led to a much more speedy recovery. That starts with individual preparedness And so this little scenario that we've got here is an exercise that we're going to ask you to participate in. For some of you, this was a real event this summer. So the scenario is that 30% of the power has gone out in Willoughby LGA. It's not known when the power will come back on, and you are one of the people that's affected. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, please, is if you will all stand. We're going to get you moving. We're going to give you a good chance for conversation and starting to swap information and starting to build that kind of resilience and information flow. I'm going to ask the councillors if they would probably move to that back display board there too to pick up your facilitator. For the rest of you who are here, can you form yourselves up fairly quickly around each of the posters? We have facilitators around them in about a group of 5 or 6, and they will lead you through this exercise. It'll be pretty sharp, short, shiny, but it's starting that whole thing about testing how prepared you are. I'm going to just ask the facilitators to call out the topics that you chose at that really high level about the issues that you then explored for days 1, 3 and 5, just so we can get a feeling of the diversity across the groups and the commonality. Angela, your group?
We focused on access to perishable food and access to technology.
Technology and perishable food. Mel, yours?
We focused on medical issues and food spoilage.
Food spoilage and medical issues. Nick, yours?
Cooking, lack of hot water. But we then talked about feelings of frustration and anxiety and dealing with the unknown.
Okay, so a psychological development as well as the practical developments about cooking, hot water. Terrific. Chris, yours?
Yeah, we zoomed in on medical health appliances and transport.
So medical health appliances and transport. Okay. David, your group?
We really looked at largely the vulnerable community and how we'd act as a neighbourhood to support those around us.
Okay.
There was a broad one, and then we focused here on food spoiling.
Okay, food spoiling is a big one. And then how do we help the vulnerable members of the community?
Yes.
Yeah, Tanya?
And we've also gone down the no fridge or refrigeration, but we've also concentrated a lot on access, particularly given the group in our group.
Okay, so accessibility, and the first one was?
And the first one was refrigeration.
Refrigeration and food spoilage. Okay, so we all love our food, don't we? It's quite obvious. Thank you very much for that. I hope that was fairly stimulating and that you got some good discussion. Could you please return to your seats and we'll continue the proceedings? And we can welcome the Mayor back to the microphone.
Okay, so thanks everyone. I know from our group discussions it was quite interesting about the far-reaching impacts that this have, and having only just been through it where I was out without power for 3 days, I can assure you that the fridge and freezer doesn't last terribly well. So we're now going to invite McDonald to come and talk about the Council's response and what we've done in reaction to the crisis, I guess, that we've had recently. Thanks.
So as the Mayor said, I'm going to walk you through, I guess, some of the immediate response that Council undertook in some of the most recent storms, and also talk about some of the general process that we undertake in regard to preparation and preparedness for emergencies. I guess looking around the room and listening to the discussion that just happened, a lot of the things that occur to you are very similar to the things that are occurring to council. So if you're without power, the high likelihood is that some of council's facilities are going to be without power. If you don't have communications, it may be that some of the council communication systems are down as well. So when you do ring council and I guess log that first call to say there's something wrong in my street, there's a tree down or something, I guess what we're asking for is some understanding, because if it's a wide-scale issue, quite often that will be impacting us as well, and it won't be, I guess, one person just impacted, it'll be yourselves. So as well as us facing, I guess, the similar issues or the same issues, we'll be undertaking a series of processes to try and understand how big the issue is. So there's a triage process which we will undertake to get a feeling for where the issues are and how widespread they are. Now, we'll do that in a number of ways. We have our customer call centre, which will be taking calls from residents explaining to us some of the issues they're facing, but we'll also have staff in the field undertaking visual inspections and observations to understand what the impact is. We may not resolve the impact immediately though. Some of our process is just collecting that first piece of information, because we need to understand how big the issue is before we can just start diving in. We won't necessarily start cutting up the first tree we come to, because it may not be our first or highest priority. I guess the other thing is we need to ensure that the community's safe. So our first response may not be to fix the issue, it may be just to make the issue safe or make the problem safe. So a lot of the time, when a tree is down, it may also be related to power lines down, and we won't be sending our staff into a situation where there's live power. So we're reliant on some of the other service providers to be there first to actually turn the power off or make the site safe so that our staff can then go in, or the SES staff can go in and do whatever it is they need to do. So once we've identified the size of the work, we will then start to dispatch our crews and undertake a program of works. And as I said, we'll undertake it on a priority basis. So typically the priority will look something like this. Our major infrastructure will be tried to be opened up and cleared first. And that'll include bridges, any retaining walls or major walls, major roads, state, regional roads and the like, or any major drains. We'll then look at, on a progressive basis, other works which might include power lines and council trees, and as I said, we'll wait until the power's turned off before we start to clear those. It could be a more local road, only servicing a smaller amount of the community. And then we'll move on to things like footpaths or driveways. So one of the, I guess, complaints we got, not a complaint, but a request for work we got in the last storm was, my driveway's blocked, I can't get out. We understand, but we'll try to do what we can to open that driveway for you, but in some instances we had roads where multiple people couldn't get in and out of a whole suburb, so that took priority over a single driveway. Parks, you'll find that in the last storm, especially in the November storm, we had a lot of parks impacted, but they were prioritised relatively low. We wanted to get the transport systems open and operating as soon as possible. So some of the parks actually just had tape and closed signs erected for about a period of 3 or 4 days before we got to them. Now, we know, again, that was inconvenient, but again, it's part of that priority process. So parks were dealt with, but not until we had our transport system back up and running. And then finally, bushland that's impacted. And in some instances, it might be a week or more before we can get to our bushland spaces. So there's some principles relating to emergency management that follow the logic of prevention, preparation, response and recovery. I've talked to you briefly already about the response and how we respond, but prior to that, there's quite a bit of work that we can do as council, and a community, both in the way of prevention and preparation, and also in that recovery phase. If I can talk about some of the preparation works that we undertake, you'd all be familiar with hazard reduction and some vegetation clearing. We undertake that both for bushfire purposes and for storm purposes, so we try to keep the material or the fire load as low as we can, especially around assets or homes that are deemed to be in a dangerous location. We try to keep our stormwater pits and drains clear of debris so that when we do get these huge storm events, they operate as best as possible. We try to restore and include the most appropriate native vegetation, especially with our street trees. We found that some of the street trees that were planted many, many years ago aren't always the most suitable trees, and so we're starting to change some of the logic about what is a suitable street tree so that when we do get storms, they're more tolerant to the type of events that we're getting. And I guess also as part of our overall design function too, you know, we can't design for every event, but we try to design our stormwater systems and our road systems to carry certain rainfall events, try to design our streetscapes as best as we can to minimise disruption in the event that something does occur at a later stage. Council's also involved or a representative on the local emergency management committee. It's a committee that is formed under legislation. Every council in New South Wales needs to be on a local emergency management committee. Willoughby and Lane Cove share its committee responsibilities. Being relatively small in geographic area, we found one committee can cover the two local government areas relatively easily. It consists of combat agencies as listed there, which include ambulance, Fire and Rescue New South Wales, SES, and of course the police force. But then it has a number of support agencies, predominantly the local government areas that house the local emergency management committee, but also a number of utilities, the gas company, the water company, the electricity company, and transport providers are members or observers on that committee. This allows us to firstly develop good relationships with those various agencies and allows us to, when there is an emergency, to make quick contact and get the right people in the right place at the right time so that we can respond to the emergency and hopefully have a coordinated response. If you think about the combat agencies, most of you will be familiar with them, but we've just listed there, you know, the SES is responsible for that flood and storm, tempest and tsunami events. The Rural Fire Service for those fires within a rural district. New South Wales Health are responsible for health responses. New South Wales Police for obviously law enforcement during any event. And search and rescue matters, and then of course Fire and Rescue New South Wales for fires within their area and major structure collapse. Now typically on most days today, each of those agencies gets on with their own business. If there's a storm, the SES will address the storm. If there's a house fire, the Fire and Rescue New South Wales will attend to that, and the police will get on with their own business. But in those instances when there is a large emergency and we need to, I guess, provide a coordinated response, Council has a number of additional responsibilities, and one of those is the Secretariat to the Local Emergency Management Committee. So we will open up the Local Emergency Management Centre, where each of those agencies can send a representative along, and we can have a coordinated approach so that we're not tripping over each other, we're not sending all our crews to the one location and ignoring another location, and we're getting, I guess, good intelligence from across the area and acting as one rather than a number of individual agencies. We have other responsibilities as well as the local emergency management committee responsibilities though as well. We try to provide the open communications across those agencies, so as well as providing the Emergency Management Centre, we also provide a communications liaison between the groups. And I guess some of the other things we've mentioned and it came up in the workshops undertaken earlier is we're also the waste authority. So council is there to clean up the red bin and the green bin waste. So many of you mentioned leaf litter, and food wastage was one of the big things that came up earlier. So council manages the waste services. Of course, red bins for your food wastage, green bins for your green vegetation litter. We, during the last storm, provided additional services to try and cater for those increases in the volume of waste that was coming through from people. We encouraged people to use their green bins as much as possible, and in some instances we were able to also coordinate sort of a more broader collection system for some of the larger vegetation material that was around the local areas. In addition to that, many of you also mentioned power issues and hot water issues I saw came up as well. So council also can provide in some of these situations, depending on what facilities we have available and which facilities have access to power and hot water, shower facilities for hygiene, or possibly even power at our libraries for just charging up your phone. So I know in the last storms we've made available our libraries on a number of occasions so that people can take their mobile phones or their iPad and just charge them up, sit in a corner and charge them up and get them back up and running. Also, people who were without water or without power for hot water were able to visit our Willoughby Leisure Centre and get access to showers. So there's some of the additional facilities we provide. Council will also provide evacuation centres in the need that people need to actually leave their home and find alternate accommodation at a very short notice. Longer term, Red Cross, the Salvation Army and some of the support groups like that will provide longer term facilities. But in the short term, if you need to be evacuated, some of our sites will be turned into evacuation centres. We don't tell you where they are because we don't know where they're going to be until the event happens. So when the event happens, again, that's part of that communication process of identifying what's the most appropriate facility for an evacuation centre and guiding you to that. So as well as us helping you, there's some other things about, I guess, a question that, what is it that residents and businesses can do to support themselves or even support council? As I mentioned before, you're welcome to contact council direct, but we find that we're getting a lot of calls that aren't necessarily related to council. We will pass them on your behalf, but it's a quicker process and more direct if you go direct to the state agency responsible. So I've provided already the list of state agencies earlier, the combat agencies and the responsibility areas for each of those. We try not to put the direct information on our website. We just provide the contact details because we find that the agencies, the state government agencies, may change their information from time to time and we don't want to be out of date with that. So the best form we've found is on our websites, we'll provide you contacts to them and a web link so that you can get straight to them. As I said, you're welcome to contact us for council-related matters, and if it's a non-council-related matter, we'll do our best to pass that on to the relevant agency. And just to give you a bit of a feel for some of the volume of work that came in through the last storms, there's 862 additional man-hours put into storm cleanup. And you can see there, we actually had to call in contractors ourselves. We didn't have enough staff on board to handle all the initial work, so there's a considerable amount of contract work required just to do some of that cleanup work. The other thing that came up as I noticed walking around with the groups was the willingness of residents to work with each other and across the community and with their neighbours. And that's one of the things, I guess, from a resilience point of view we'd like to encourage is that get to know your neighbours, get to feel comfortable dropping in on them. Are you okay? Especially in an event like that. If they're without power and you've got something or some power, it might be something that from a resilience point of view, you can offer your neighbour to come on over, have a hot shower. I've got solar power, so, come and have a shower. I also mentioned earlier about our website. There's a number of apps, plans and tools. We have some of these links on our website. When you sat down tonight, on your chair was a sheet of A4 paper with a number of these web links and apps provided. I'll just go through some of these briefly, but know that you can always go back to that sheet for more information. So the Rural Fire Service and Fire and Rescue New South Wales both have bushfire survival plans on their website. They're a good tool to actually think through what you need to do before the fire comes. So you can go through, you can map out what it is, where you're going to go, what information you need prior to a storm or a fire hitting. It also has access to the local bushfire risk management plans. The Red Cross app is a great little app you can download onto your phone or iPad device. It allows you to establish a network of support so you can have your contact list in there quickly for people that you need to contact in emergency. It allows you to pre-plan for any emergency and work out exactly what it is that you will do when it happens, because your mind may not be actually operating as clearly as you would think in an emergency. So it's good to have thought this through when your mind is clear and you've got time in your hands, rather than when you're rushed and you're not in the best spirits to be thinking through some of these things. So these are good little applications to think through. New South Wales Health has some good information on pandemics and also managing heat waves. And of course, there's also some emergency contacts, again, on our website. Yep, and that's it. Well, I'm going to hand over to Jason now from SES, who can talk us through some of their responses too.
Madam Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so much for participating in this community information forum. It's a wonderful initiative by council. No doubt the more prepared and the more resilient the community is, the better outcomes we can achieve when Mother Nature turns its little thing from time to time, as we found recently. This presentation will be broken down into three aspects, but before I do so, I just wanted to introduce the team that I have here. I have my deputy, Mike Cheng. He'll be speaking in relation to the PowerPoint. We also have Brett over there. He's a deputy team leader. He's our unit equipment coordinator. And one of our newer members, Adam. We're all volunteers, and we're located at 25 Station Street in Narrabeen, just down the road opposite the Oval, if those who are familiar in Narrabeen. So feel free to drop by at any stage where we meet on a Monday from 7 o'clock onwards, and obviously when we're operational, that gets busy as well. So we're just going to address three things. The first is what the SES focuses on. The second is tools available to the community in order for it to be better prepared. And the third is examples of some local actions that we at Willoughby Lane Cove have undertaken. Perhaps I'll start with what the SES focuses on. Bearing in mind that today's community information session is how to prepare for an emergency, emergencies take a lot of forms, obviously. So what's our bag? We do storms, we do floods, and we do tsunamis. What does that mean? That we're the combat agency when it comes to storms, floods, and tsunamis. Obviously, tsunamis are not as prevalent as storms and floods, but in the event that that would happen, we would also be the combat agency, which means that we are the lead agency to deal with the response. In terms of storms and floods, what do we do? Matters of a temporary and emergency nature. So we're talking tarps on roofs, isolating trees, dealing with if there are power lines which are down, we would isolate those areas. We would get in touch with Ausgrid to ensure that help is on the way. If access and egress is affected in major arterial roads, to vehicles in private properties, wherever it's of an emergency nature, we would have recon crews by phone, actual crews undertaking reconnaissance by team leaders from our unit, and we would have crews to actually deal with jobs if there's an overhanging branch that is precariously perched over residences, if there's a leak, water penetrating homes via windows, loose tiles and the like, we'd put a tarp, that sort of thing. So obviously the more resilient and the more prepared the community is, and the better outcomes we can achieve. So these sessions are absolutely critical. So from a practice point of view and from steps you can take to get ready before it actually happens. So that's what we do. And in terms of how it all happens, if there's an issue, a resident might ring 132-500, which goes to our State Operations Centre down in Wollongong. You log your address, your name, your mobile phone and your contact details, the nature of the problem, It then gets referred to our duty officer because we look after the local government areas of Willoughby City Council as well as Langcove Council, and it'll go to our operations or the IMT team to deal with and triage from that point forward. So perhaps I might just hand over to my deputy Mike to take over at this stage, and he'll just go through the presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Jason, and welcome everyone. Thanks for having us here. What I'm going to go through today is just a bit of a presentation of how we can get ready together for storms. So, as we've introduced, the State Emergency Service, the SES, is the prime agency for storms, floods and tsunamis. We are involved with the planning, preparation and response to these type of emergencies. We'll also go through how you can prepare, some safety tips and advice, and where to get information. So the picture here on the right is actually of a local job. From memory, this is the back of a Tarman, actually back of Narrabeen, around the Tarman sort of area. It's a very large tree branch on a car, so this is something that we would typically do. The primary concern for us of these type of jobs is safety, life first. So is anyone trapped? If it's not, it's also safety. So a power line's down. It's a safety to the crew, safety to the public. So similar to council, we have a very similar sort of priority list where the most impact, we'll get the priority jobs to like roads blocked, that sort of thing, where it affects a lot of people before we'll get to the ones that are so lower on the list, which are trees down, in backyards or things like that, which are low priority. So emergencies do happen, and these are pictures from the local area. So the first one on the top left is actually the back of my head, but that one's in Northbridge. So a tree down on a house. This does occur. In the last storm, we had quite a significant number of very large, sort of 10, 20, 30 metre high trees come down onto properties. The next one is not one from our area, but it is typically what happens during flash flooding. So with flash flooding, a lot of rain comes and basically all the gutters, the roads are filled with water. We don't recommend you do what those cars are actually doing and driving through floodwater. It doesn't take much floodwater for your car to actually stop working and then you're suddenly stuck. And that's when we will have to come and do a flood rescue to get you out of that sticky situation that you're in. So please don't drive through floodwater. The one on the top, which is third from the left, does anyone actually recognise where that might be? It's actually Willoughby Road, where the sort of car dealerships are, around that sort of area. So that occurred not in the last storm, but a couple of years ago. That's an entire very large branch that came down and blocked that street, or that road actually, stopping buses, cars, everyone. So that for us is a high priority job. It affects a lot of people and it's a public safety issue. The next one across, the fourth from the left on the top, is leaking roof. We get a lot of those calls. So that's typically when water comes through as a result of usually blocked gutters that are full of leaves due to lack of home maintenance or other issues such as broken tiles. All these things are preventable. The one thing you can't prevent is probably the tree that comes down and comes onto the roof. Unfortunately, you can't prevent that, but we definitely are able to assist with those kind of things. The one on the right, top right, is not from our area again. However, it's a typical example of extremely heavy rain and or hail. So when that occurs, basically leaves, twigs, tree branches, everything starts coming down, and that causes multiple issues. Apart from hail damage, it can block gutters, drains, all that kind of thing from the amount of debris that just gets taken down. Okay, so on the bottom, we'll go through that. So the bottom, it's basically what happens when you don't secure your jumping or play equipment. It goes flying in the wind, and the same occurs for loose sheet metal roofs, little sheds, that kind of thing. So our main thing is to make sure, please ensure that you secure outdoor equipment, play equipment, and trampolines and that sort of thing when a storm is forecast, because they do go flying, and when they go flying, they go into power lines, other people's properties, roofs, cause significant damage. So please secure a property prior to a storm, and that's part of the storm preparation. The next one to that, second on the bottom to the left, is slightly out of the Willoughby Council area. It's actually in St Leonard's on the south, so it's slightly in Lane Cove, just on the border, but that's a tree down on the house. That's a 20-metre high tree that's come down near the park down there. Third from the left is definitely in Willoughby's area. That is in Chatswood, and that's an apartment block where the pumps have failed and the basement is essentially flooding. So we were able to assist with that, with some pumping to help with the water, just to keep it under control. But that's a very dangerous situation, because if that water comes up very quickly and those pumps have failed, people can actually get trapped into that situation. So that's something to be aware of. And the second from the right up here is a much more recent one, which some of you may be familiar with, and that is in Artarmon on Houndon Road. So that was blocked for a few days. The issue there is tree came down, blocking a lane, which is not normally a problem. We can normally deal with that, or council can deal with that. One of us will deal with it. The main issue there is it took down the power lines and the power pole. So that was a hazard to everyone. So neither agency was able to assist with that, till Ausgrid was able to attend and make that safe. So that had power lines with a car and a couple of motorbikes underneath in Artarmon on the main road there. And on the right here, bottom right, is our response truck with cutting up a tree branch that's on the road in, I think that was Willoughby, that one. Okay, so this is typically emergencies that we would attend. So what is your role? Well, while emergency services do all they can to help, and we do everything that we can to help, the person most responsible for your own well-being is you. You need to be prepared, and you need to be aware of the forecasts that are coming and the warnings that are taking place, and be prepared beforehand. And that's the best thing you can do. Emergency services will help you, but you'll also need to help yourself as well and get prepared. And there's definitely things you can do now, and we'll go through some of those to help you and your loved ones cope better during emergencies. So, the 5 steps to getting ready. First of all is to know your risk, and this is available from, I'll show you a couple of apps, and also council can assist with this as well. So know your risk. What are the hazards in your area? Is it large trees? Is it potential for flooding? Those kind of risks. Plan now. So make a plan. What are you actually going to do when these things occur? If a large storm occurs, maybe you lose power like you've had before, what are you actually going to do? Have a plan, and then execute the plan when things don't go go pear-shaped and an emergency occurs. Get your home ready. So like I mentioned before, clear out all outdoor equipment, anything that can fly, outdoor chairs. Looks great on your balcony, but when the wind comes, they're off the balcony. And unfortunately, something like the last storm, like a 9-kilo LPG tank actually came down from a balcony, and unfortunately someone didn't make it. So those things do occur, so please secure your things, especially in the Chatswood Willoughby area. There are a lot of high-rises, a lot of people storing things on their balcony. We did do a job probably a couple of years ago now in St Leonard's, where we had somebody's laundry line, the entire rack, come off and then get stuck. And this is above the rail line, so that was a bit of a problem, affecting transport. So even things like, entire clothes horse could actually come flying. Be aware. So that's about the storm warnings. Be aware of the situation around you. The Bureau of Meteorology has daily forecasts of what could the weather is that day, and they'll usually have potential for weather warnings. So be aware and listen out for the radio. Check social media feed and that sort of thing. And the 5th one is look after each other. So as we mentioned before, look after your neighbours, look after your family, check if everyone's okay. It's also good if you can plan together as well with your neighbours. So, if this happens to you, what are you doing? This happens to me, what are we doing? So everyone actually knows as a community what everyone else is doing. So know your risk. To do a plan, you can talk to council. Okay, the third one here is an app, which is called the My Hazards app from the Insurance Council of Australia, so you can search for that. That basically is an app where you can put your address in, and it'll come up with the type of hazards you've got. So, for example, it says, for St Leonard's, for example, the hazard at St Leonard's is high risk of trees, or high risk of storm, high risk of storm is a hazard there. But for different areas, different hazards. So you can log on to that. So it's My Hazards app. That can actually show you what the issues are at the risks at your particular property. And the last one there is connect with your emergency services. So come and speak to us. We've got some brochures here to help you prepare. Welcome to have a chat to us. Come and visit, and we'll help you prepare as well. Visit our website, visit our social media feeds. So plan now. So within your family, talk, and with your neighbours as well. What are you going to do? Have a grab bag, which is ready to go should you need to go. The grab bag should contain things like your passport, important documents, phone chargers, all that kind of thing. Have your home emergency kit as well. So that contains, like when I went around, people mentioned torches, candles, that kind of thing. Battery-powered radio, so when your power goes out, you know what you need. Also should have some plastic bags and things like that in there as well, because if a storm occurs, damage occurs in your home, you'll need plastic bags in a hurry to be able to protect documents and things inside your home. Passport, all important documents you'll need to basically store in one location. So if you actually need to evacuate, you're not going to search through all different places of the house to find your birth certificate, your children's birth certificates, where your passports are, all those kind of things. So keep it in one place so you can just grab it and go. Plan Now also is the Red Cross app, very, very good app. Has lots of information about what you need to do beforehand. And the exit sign is, what are you going to do if you actually need to be evacuated? If you have an emergency evacuation, do you have a plan where you're going to go, who you're going to contact? Are you going to stay with relatives, friends, etc.? Get your home ready. General home maintenance. So as I mentioned before, things like block gutters cause a lot of damage. A little bit of water suddenly becomes a lot of water when you have block gutters. So things like just clearing your gutters, that sort of thing, is a good idea. Smoke alarm. Smoke alarms are good, but they also have to be working. So you need to have batteries in them, and they need to be working. So you should test them, and your insurance is up to date as well. So if the worst does occur, you do have your insurance. So be aware. So there's lots of apps. Unfortunately, everything's app-based now, and there's lots of websites. Facebook, although for Facebook, make sure you're actually subscribed to like SES or RFS or someone, not just hearsay. BOM, Bureau of Meteorology, My Hazards app, RFS, Live Traffic as well, which is the car one, Twitter, WW, which is basically a webpage, and ABC Emergency. So ABC is the actual emergency broadcaster, and they're the best one to listen to for actual emergency information during an emergency. Look out for each other. We can all help each other in many ways. So basically looking after your neighbours. Once an emergency occurred, make sure you're all okay. And then if safe, check on your neighbours as well, and report any emergencies or if you require help. Resources, plenty of resources available. So SES website, so all the apps I mentioned before, but for storms, SES definitely has lots of information there. They've got checklists, what you need to do. I've also got a lot of information here, brochures you can take home as well. But RFS also has their website, so there's a fire rescue as well for the fire type side of things. But for us, for storms and floods, definitely plenty of information on the website. Also, our Twitter and Facebook also has information and live feeds as well. Know who to call. So if an emergency does occur and you do require emergency assistance, if it is life-threatening, that is definitely 000, 000, police, fire, ambulance. If it's flood rescue, it'll be SES as well. So if someone's life is at risk, so power lines or whatever on a car or a bus, or a tree down on a car or a bus, that sort of thing, which is life-threatening, definitely call 000. Or if you're stuck in floodwaters and you require emergency rescue, same. For SES, it's 132 500. And please call us if you require emergency assistance with storm damage. And by emergency assistance, I mean the tree is actually on your house, or the tree is blocking a road. Things like a branch down in your backyard or a branch that's fallen in your pool is really not an emergency. You can probably sort that out yourself with a contractor or a handy person or whatever. Please leave SES 132500 for actual emergency calls. We get a lot of calls for tree branches that are down in backyards, on the ground, safe, not doing anything, or they fall in your pool. Please don't call us for those. Please sort them out yourself, because you're blocking up the lines for people who are actually trying to report a tree down that's on Eastern Valley Way, for example. Or I've got a 40-metre tree that's just fallen on my house. They're the type of calls that we would like to assist with. So, if possible, for the smaller stuff, please leave that. For power lines down, again, similar to council, SES cannot attend, SES will attend a job that's got power lines down, but we can't do anything unless the power's made safe. So safety is the number one thing for our crews. So if there are power lines down, please call Ausgrid on 131 388. That's their emergency number, and they can attend with their crews to make power safe. Oops, I'll just go back. For emergency calls, there's also an app for the National Relay Service. So those who are unable to use a normal phone, there is a National Relay Service, which is a text-based service you can use. And that's our little magnet for SES 132500. Shows you during storms, floods, that's who to call. So very quickly, I'll try and finish up. Get ready for storms. Maintain your yard or balcony. Make sure you clear your yard, basically, of all those things that fly. Same deal for the balcony. Clean gutters and drains. Trim trees and branches. We're talking about large branches that are overhanging your house. When a storm occurs, that's the kind of branches that come down onto your house. Break your tiles, and that's when you get exactly the thing on the right-hand side, roof damage, and that's when you'll get water leaking into your roof. So again, roof damage as well. Sometimes the wind can actually blow the tiles loose, and that's when you'll have water leaking in suddenly in a big storm. So do all those things, plus also check your insurance, make sure you've got an emergency plan, and also prepare an emergency kit. So again, the kit that's got the candles, the torches, the radio, that sort of thing. So get ready for floods. Normally this applies to riverine flooding, so where there's a river and the water comes up very quick. But however, Willoughby has a specific risk, which is flash flooding. So during heavy rain, I'm sure you've all seen it, suddenly all the roads become very flooded, a lot of water starts to pull up and occur. That's the main risk that we have in Willoughby. There's a couple of areas in the Willoughby council area that actually are slightly higher. So know your risk. Get the My Hazards app, or check with council if you're in that risk area. If the water starts rising, you need to know where you need to go. You may be safer potentially to stay in your house rather than go somewhere, or maybe get out of that situation beforehand. Know who to call. So if your life is at risk, it's definitely 000, or if you require emergency assistance from SES 132500, and know how you'll be warned. So the Bureau of Meteorology will issue warnings for heavy rain and that sort of thing. So talking about the Bureau of Meteorology weather and flood warnings, so severe weather warning is something that's going to occur in the next 1 to 24 hours. So we're talking about very, very strong winds, 90k or more, very heavy rain, or a lot of heat. Severe thunderstorm warnings are the ones that are occurring now or very soon, and they're the ones that are basically for hail, heavy rain, very strong winds, and tornadoes and things like that. Flood watch and flood warnings also issued by Bureau of Meteorology. And the most important message we have for you all today is you wouldn't drive through a bushfire, so please don't drive through floods. One of the biggest issues we have is actually people driving through floods and getting stuck in flood water. So last thing I'll leave you with is, what 3 things would you grab if you actually had to evacuate your home? Have a think about that. And they're the things that you probably want to pack in your emergency kit should you need to leave. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us here, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That was really very informative, and some common themes running through there. One is that we do have support through council and also the SES, but also a theme about helping yourself and helping others, and I think that's really important. And I know that when I was at Without Power, certainly I was reaching out to networks and friends to assist, which they did so very ably. Now, there was a bit of a focus on apps. If you're not confident with apps or you're not so tech savvy, just letting you know that the library does run courses, tech savvy for seniors, those kinds of things. So if you're not completely confident around that, there is assistance available through our library services. So that's an important point. So I'll leave it at that now. As I mentioned before, the councillors, senior staff, and I presume Jason, Michael, and the team will be able to stay. So if you've got individual questions, we will be hanging back to talk to you. But thank you very much for coming along. I hope you got something useful out of tonight. I know I did. And we very much appreciate your support for these events. We look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you.